welcome to yet another Halal Food Podcast. Today, we've got the pleasure of welcoming one of the known faces in halal retail in the UK. We've got Dr. Gama Khan with us today. Dr. Gama Khan is well known within the halal stakeholder group within the UK. So he's well respected in terms of understanding the dynamics of the halal retail. So that's why we brought him here today. So I'm going to give Gama the opportunity. I call him Gama, but his full name is Gulam. I'm going to give Gama the opportunity to introduce himself properly. Gama.
Thank you very much, Awal, for that kind introduction. As Awal says, my name is Gama Khan, otherwise known to Gama to my colleagues and in the sector. I represent the Shazan Foods Limited. We represent a number of brands: Shazan, Shazan Select, Fresh Halal Market, amongst other brands, basically. And we are number one brand, basically, in the UK, approximately about 55%. We also manufacture and supply exclusively for KFC, the 9-piece in the UK. And we operate to what we call the British Halal Charter, if I just run through that. So that ensures the principle that all animals are rated to strict welfare standards, all animals to be alive and healthy at the point of slaughter, all slaughtering is to be carried out by hand by a Muslim. The animals are slaughtered with a swift incision to the throat with a razor-sharp blade by a Muslim reciting the tasmiyah. Yeah. Any flowing blood from the carcass is completely drained. All our slaughtermen are highly trained to carry out slaughter under strict welfare conditions. Our sites, wherever possible, will only handle halal ingredients so there's no cross-contamination. We work with independent halal accreditation bodies such as HFA, HMC. And I'm quite happy to take questions, basically. Fire away, please, Will.
Yeah, you mentioned the halal charter. That is one that many people will be surprised to hear, and well, for consumers will be happy with it because you've mentioned things like welfare of the animal is at heart in this charter. The animal is alive, which is an important requirement by the halal rules or an important halal slaughter rules. Do you think all certifiers in the UK comply with this charter?
It's interesting because when we started the Shazan's halal project in about 2014, we looked at the halal standards. And while the halal principles are consistent, the interpretation of the principles wasn't consistent. And what you found is that there are numerous interpretations of the standard. For example, our principle that the animal is alive at the point of slaughter. For example, stun is alive, animals are alive at the point of slaughter. Non-stun is alive at the point of slaughter. But then the term stun sometimes is misleading, and the understanding of it is misleading because sometimes the term stun is used when the animal is dead. And so because of that confusion, we were quite clear that whatever we did needs to comply with these principles and we would get them independently verified. There are various standards out there. I mean, there's, like, for example, if I discuss mechanical slaughter, we don't accept mechanical slaughter, for example, and neither do our certification bodies. And a lot of people confuse mechanical slaughter, but mechanical slaughter is a welfare issue because normally mechanical slaughter would be applied to birds that are dead. So therefore they shouldn't be feeling pain. But when you have a bird that's done to stun is alive, it's more important to get the cut right, which is why we do it by hand, because the welfare of the animal is key for us, to ensure minimum pain. So that's just one example. The other one is, for example, like you'll hear things like the gas, when it comes to stunning. And if the animal can't recover because we can't demonstrate it in the UK for legal reasons, then we don't actually accept gas, and neither do the certifiers. So I think as long as the methods can be demonstrated to comply with the principles, we're quite happy to accept them in conjunction with the certifiers. And so we just came up with these, we call it the British Halal Charter, which has been presented at the stakeholders, and it's been worked on so everybody can accept and work within the framework, basically, And is a transitional process, and it's quite important to work to a consistent set of standards so that it makes things easier. And at the moment, if you go out there, the halal logo itself is diluted. There's various standards that in a number of cases don't actually comply with the principles. And what you'll find is that some certifier has signed them off somewhere, which needs to be addressed. And there's work going on in the stakeholder groups to address that. So it is quite key that we work to a consistent set of standards, not only for our consumers, but also for our producers and farmers and everybody. So it creates a level playing field, which is key for survival and adding value to our supply chains.
Gama, you mentioned something very, very important. You said you guys, your brand does not accept, or any of the certifiers you use, the Halal Food Authority and the Halal Monitoring Committee, none of them accept gas tunning. It's important for listeners and viewers of this program to understand that in the UK, the law actually requires that the gas must kill the bird in the chamber before the bird exits the chamber. So if you're consuming any halal poultry products slaughtered in the UK, it's very likely that the product would have been the animal would have been dead, or the bird would have been dead before the neck was cut. So it's very important. So Gama, thank you very much for highlighting that.
What about? Sorry, can I just also add? I think, and this is another example, there's nothing to stop anybody bringing in chicken from overseas that's gas killed with a halal logo and sell it in the UK as halal. And so therefore, this is where there's not a level playing field. And these are sort of things that when I say about the halal logo is diluted, the infrastructures need to be put in place so that it's a level playing field for the UK producers.
So you as a retailer, trying your best to ensure that you comply 100% with the halal rules, ensuring that at least you've got even 2 halal certifiers monitoring your products. How do you feel when cheap products from overseas are brought in by other retailers who are not operating to your standards? So they may be able to get cheap. What's your comment on that?
Sorry, we're not a retailer. What we do is we supply to the retailers, okay? I think what happens is that we are a producer. And when we have to go and compete with these products, which might be produced to different welfare standards, different halal standards, then it puts us at a disadvantage. But when you buy a product in retail, what tends to happen is, or any elsewhere, you have a halal logo, a generic halal logo. And although it's regulated and the infrastructure is in place, people can still produce and bring in product which brackets, says it's halal, but then that's where it's slightly misleading. Because, for example, you can get a product that would have been produced to certain standards and then gas coming in. So therefore, it's a bit misleading when you follow it through to the principles. Now, because it's been certified by somebody overseas, and this is where I think attention needs to be paid to the certifiers, because you got certifiers that just issue a certificate, piece of paper, and then they might not go back there for another year. And anybody can be a certifier. There's no regulation, for example, there's more regulation probably if I'm going to drive a taxi than to become a halal certifier. For example, I have to go to the council, I've got to go through checks and everything when I want to be a taxi driver. But when it comes to halal certifier, I just set up and become one. Whether I've got the experience or not is a different matter, and the right skill set. So that's where it's quite important to have reputable certifiers, but then there needs to be a system in place to regulate the certifiers so that it's consistent, so that anybody using the halal logo is being done to a standard. It's a bit like a gas boiler, if somebody comes and fixes it, it's Kogi registered or whatever, set the standards, and you got confidence in what they're doing. And at the moment, I think in the halal sector, there is a lacking in confidence, which is why I say we work with reputable halal bodies. Now, for example, on our site, we have supervisors there, watching the product, basically supervising the product to ensure that it's being done correctly. We're independently accredited, and obviously we could work in a different fashion, but we choose not to, because we believe in halal, and we take it very seriously, and we want it to be done right, which is why we have certifiers when we're producing product and packing product, because we just want to make sure that we're doing it properly and it gives confidence to consumers. Now, obviously, when you have all this infrastructure in place and you're doing it in a certain fashion, it costs money.
Absolutely.
And then when you're competing with somebody that isn't necessarily following the same standard, then it puts you at a disadvantage. And what I'll do is I'll talk about export, because when you step back, it's a similar sort of principle when it comes to exports. We're working to different sort of standards. And it's a bit like, running in a 100-meter race. Everybody runs according to certain standards.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in like a halal race, one person will be on a moped, somebody will be in a Ferrari, somebody, it's just inconsistent. It's not a level playing field, which is, it saddens me and disappoints me, because we have a lot of fantastic standards in the UK, fantastic experience, but yeah, do we have a consistent standard in the UK? The answer is no. People work to various standards, and I think since Brexit, it's given us an opportunity where we need to come together.
Yeah. So Gama, you guys have taken your time to come out with a charter and also have certification with supervisors on site. What do you think? Do you think it's fair that some will be importing products, relatively cheaper products from countries where there is no standards, there is no supervision, like you guys are doing at the minute? Do you think it's a fair or a level playing ground for you and those who are importing?
Thank you very much for that point. One of the challenges we sort of face is that when we've got a consistent standard and we work with supervisors on site, you find different degrees of supervision. There's supervision where someone will turn up, just give you a certificate. There's somebody that will turn up, do an order, give you a certificate. So there's various ways of doing it depending on the complexity of the process. Number one. Number two, anybody can be a certifier. It's probably harder to be a taxi driver than a certifier. Yeah, if you want to be a taxi driver, you have to go through certain checks, you have to do this, you have to do a number of things. If for a certifier, anybody could just become a certifier. Whether they got the skill set or necessary know-how is totally different. It's just a case of I'm a certifier. And so we talk from experience. We've been overseas, and whilst there are a good system, there's also very poor systems. So anything coming in the UK, for example, can have a halal logo, but whether it complies to a certain set of standards, like for example, the British Halal Charter principle, and they can be linked, is dubious. Because what you'll say is, oh, a halal body signed it off, but whether it complies or not is different, because their interpretation and their understanding is very different as well. So it puts it at a disadvantage, because when you have to pay for supervision and you have to pay for working to set criteria, it costs. But then when you compete with somebody that doesn't and is cutting corners, it does put you at a disadvantage. And it also puts the UK at a disadvantage as well. The producers, the farmers, it goes right down the supply chain, basically, And it also puts us at a disadvantage when we have to compete overseas as well. And I think it's quite important that is communicated to the customer. At the moment, the certifiers are not regulated in the UK. There is no system in place to say, actually, this is compliant or not. It's just a case of, oh, it's halal, basically, and it doesn't necessarily work like that. You have to have a system in place where products going from here overseas and products come in and comply to a consistent set of standards that can be linked.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned regulation of certified. Do you think this will be done better by the government, or do you think a Muslim institution like organization like the Muslim Council of Britain could regulate certifiers? I'm asking this because in New Zealand, the Ministry of Primary Industries is involved in regulation of certifiers. So what's your view on that?
I think my view would be is that I think whilst the principles and everything can be governed by a Muslim organization and the certifiers can be signed off, they need to demonstrate that they comply and they have the understanding when it comes to auditing the principles, and it's a consistent system. And if any system is being, or anything overseas being brought in, then we need to have some form of comparison that is equivalent, just like anything else. So I think the infrastructure is already there. But one of the challenges which our colleagues face in government and elsewhere is because it's signed up by halal body, it takes the ownership away. So as far as they're concerned, it's halal. But in actual fact, it's not. Number one. Number two, there's various disagreements between some of the bodies, which I can sort of understand, but I don't sort of understand, because we all need to work together. And some of the understanding isn't there, which is where I think something like a halal center of excellence will give the skill set so people talk the same sort of language, understand where they're coming from. So I think there's slight misunderstandings and also different interpretations. For example, some people will sign off gas as halal, right? Okay. Some people would sign off like mechanical as halal. Now, does it comply, strictly speaking, with some of the principles? No, but just because some scholar has signed it off somewhere with a different thought process, nothing wrong with it. But does it comply? The answer is no, it doesn't. It's made too complicated. It's not complicated. It's fairly straightforward. And I just think it needs to be simplified for the customer and also for the producers and farmers, so that there's a massive market opportunity here. When you look at the New Zealanders and you look at the Australians and you look at the Thais and you look at the Italians, they've got infrastructures in place. The global market, from the estimates I was reading, is about 1.4 trillion dollars or pounds. Yes, okay, and that's going to be going to 1.6. When you look at the Muslim population globally, it's growing basically, yeah, and they reckon it's going to be within 2030, I think, about 2 billion.
Wow.
And the Muslims, as a general rule, tend to eat more meat as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I look at some of these other countries, and they're getting ready, they're geared up, they're structured, basically. They've got uniform systems, they got everything in place, to take advantage of this market opportunity. Whereas when I look at ourselves, basically in the UK, there's quite a lot of infighting going on over the last 3 years, and I'm glad to say that a lot of people have come together and started thinking and working together. Nice. But a lot more work needs to be done so that we're all on the same page. So, when we put the halal on there, whether it's British halal or whatever, there's a set of standards that underpins that, whether it's a halal charter, like what we're working on. Yes, it complies with the principles, it's been signed off, it's been regulated, and you can only have that logo if you comply with certain principles. Like, for example, you got MSC, Mauritian Stewardship Council, or organic. It's a set of standards that it complies to, and anything coming in needs to be equivalent, which then means you got some framework, to work towards, and then we can start communicating about British halal when we go overseas and marketing and saying this is at the standards. Whereas at the moment, it's quite fragmented. And when it's fragmented, it's very difficult to manage and compete. Like, for example, when we were in Dubai, recently, and when you want to communicate with people and you want to say the standards, it's very difficult because everybody's working to slightly different ones. What you want to do is say, these are standards we work to. Yeah. It's very consistent, whereas the New Zealanders can't say that. The Australians can't say that, And this is where we sort of need to come together, understand the differences, but from a customer-facing angle, we just need to appear as a unified body that's working to set a standard. It doesn't matter what the internal divisions are, you can discuss them and frame of it. I mean, the other thing that I would have said that we put ourselves at disadvantage is we have restrictions that we work to. For example, like I go to the stakeholder groups and we got fantastic experts, experience, knowledge, everywhere. And yet, when it comes to competing on the global scale, we're not there, but yet all the expertise and everything is here. If we can just harness that, bring it together, and communicate that globally, then we will stand a better chance of competing and bringing in more investment, and value for our farmers, growers, and cities, because there is a massive opportunity, and it's how we sort of recognize that. So for me, if I go on the example of non-stun, for example, we have very, very strict welfare standards in the UK.
That's great.
But now, so understand the reasons why we want to restrict and slaughter and say this is what's going on. But then at the same time, when you step back and go, well, actually, you know what? There's people going to other countries with less welfare standards than what we're doing in the UK. And so therefore, if we're going to tackle it, then we need to tackle it on a global basis. So we're all competing on the playing field, a level playing field. But what's happening is we're not at the moment, because what we're saying is actually we're going to restrict the production here. And this is what I don't sort of understand. So if you've got the highest standards, then we should be promoting it basically and getting everybody else to work to them standards. But instead, it just appears that we're restricting ourselves, even though we have higher standards. But then when it comes to export, we're not going to recognize that that's what the consumer wants for it. Like some of the people will only accept non-stun. And if that's the way the market's going, then you have to question yourself, are we in it or are we not actually in it? That's just like one example. There's one or two others as well that you can say, go into specifics of it. But it just indicates when you step back, it's a bit like you got a rugby team, and we're sort of playing rugby. But what we're saying to the rugby team is actually, you guys can't have shoelaces, or you guys can't have this, and we're being asked to compete. Now, there might be a rationale for it, but then everybody else should be playing to the same rules as well. Why restrict ourselves?
Yeah. So now, the two controversial slaughter methods you mentioned earlier, gas stunning and also penetrative captive bull stunning. We know this does not fully comply with the Halal Charter, but we also know that it is in use in the UK or in Europe. What options have we got? Do you think dialogue with those who accept it to educate them on the dangers of using it will work? Do you think that could work?
I think fundamentally it goes to the consumer. The charter principles are the halal principles. It's not rocket science. And what we have to do is we have to interpret this, does it comply or not? Because when the customer buys halal, they believe that that's what halal implies. So therefore I think it's more fundamental than that. And so therefore they expect, if you put a weight on a pack, yes, you expect the weight to comply to that weight. It's the same with the halal logo. If you put a halal logo on there, then you expect it to comply with the principles.
So Gama, another question that comes to mind is, can you take us through what the challenges you guys face in the retail environment?
I think some of the challenges we face in the retail environment is the halal logo itself. There's different standards underpinning that. We work with the British Halal Charter, as we call it, and not everything complies to that principle. It's just behind the halal logo, for reasons I mentioned. And so therefore that puts us at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to that. I think the second thing is, because there's lots of different standards, when it comes to certain areas, that restricts choice for the Muslim consumer. Because if I wanted to go out there and procure product to the British Halal Charter, the supply chain and the infrastructure isn't always there. And if you're going to do it competitively and compete with somebody from overseas, then you can't do it because they're working to different set of standards. And obviously, in retail, whether you like it or not, basically a product has to be competitive and be able to sell. But whether the customer's aware or not of what they actually get and what's behind the halal charter, and this is where it's key, that awareness and everybody's working standards, then you can go out there and procure product and make sure all the ranges are there. So in a sort of way, those sort of challenges, basically, one is unlevel playing field, competitiveness, basically. And also, I think what you'll find is that the distribution and the supply chains aren't always there, to deliver for the Muslim customer as well. I think they're coming up when it comes to online and things like that. So some of the infrastructures aren't there. I think they're more geared up towards, for example, like mainstream. But what's happening is, as the Muslim consumer becomes more and more important, basically, what you find is the demographics are changing. So therefore, them systems are being put in place. Like you've got certain regions where the ranges in the store are more geared towards the Asian and ethnic minorities, and that's increasing, basically.
Yeah, that is interesting. So in terms of the consumer, how do you educate the consumer? How can the halal consumer be educated properly on what is going on?
I think on there, when we've sort of looked at it, and I know we've sort of discussed it during the stakeholder group, I think it's quite important to have a halal center of excellence. Okay. That's UK based. A lot of other countries have something similar. And I think this halal center of excellence would not only be educating the consumer, would do projects for Like for example, there's no measure at the moment in the industry across the board, for welfare, for example. Like I can get a chili from a supermarket, yes, okay, that tells me whether it's mild, medium, or hot, yes. But when it comes to the whole supply chain, I haven't got a factor that I can use objective measurement, basically. So I think there's work like that need to be done. Obviously, there's always discussions about stun and non-stun, which is more painful. So that constructive work can be done. So you can take opinions out and base things on fact, rather than an information, rather than subjectivity, basically. And I think it make discussion easier to bring the standards together. And so I think that halal center action will be important there. Also, I think awareness within the UK itself, because I don't think the understanding of halal is there, across the board, basically. Whether it comes to consumers, whether it comes to producers, there is a lack of understanding about what it actually is. And I think it's quite important for that. And also, I think Academy will make things more consistent, train future generations, because it's like anything. If you want, like football, for example, you go on Academy to bring the skill set, and halal sector is very similar, basically. You have to have some foundation there so people can be educated. And also certified. We spoke about certified. Anybody become a certifier? You got a structured training program there, basically, so that they can add value, and you eliminate some of the issues that we have. Also, I think it's important when you're taking product from here to overseas. You can communicate more consistently. You're talking the same language. Like, for example, when we're in Dubai, everybody thought, and I was surprised with this actually when I was speaking to a lot of the guys, they thought our lamb was grain fed. And I was like, what? And used to me, it's not, it's grass fed. And it does some of the things, so we're just more aligned to what our customers want. And it's a consistent message. Whereas at the moment, we're just running in different directions.
Yeah. So look, from what you've said, Gama, if the halal center of excellence can change perception, can educate both domestic and overseas, I think this is something the government will be very interested in. So, for instance, I get contacts from people, or I get contacted by abattoir operators who are looking for slaughtermen, for instance. So, such a center could train people who are out of work, looking for work, get a pool or a list of people who are looking for slaughter jobs, and then communicate this to industry. I think that would be a very, very good center.
I absolutely agree with you. And this is why, when we're talking about a base, a structure, because what you find is, like, a lot of these things, like when we look at certain markets, like, people are looking at different proteins and different ways of doing things. And institutes like this are quite key for educating consumers and looking at researching it properly, so you don't get rogue elements coming in and diluting the British sector. And that's what does happen, basically. For example, when it comes to GM, you got institutions in place to discuss that, yes. But when it comes to halal, there is nothing. For example, if you want to go to halal, you have to speak to about 14 different people. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You should just, you know what I mean? You should be able to just say, right, okay, halal, this is it. This is the authority. This is where we have the expertise. This is where we have the knowledge. And you know what? We actually have it there. And that's what I'm saying to you. So I find it hard to believe that other people are going forward. They're getting money and, they're doing their testing, they're setting limits. When we go to conferences, you see it. And yet you're like, hang on, but we should be the leader here. We have the expertise, and we have the products. And this is where I see the disconnect when I go overseas to export and say, well, actually, we've got all this. We just need to be aligned, and we have got fantastic products in the UK. We have got fantastic standards, and it's just a case of just align ourselves so we can take advantage of the opportunity, really.
Yeah. But it's also important, Gama, to acknowledge the fact that we do have some finest halal certifiers here. We've got the likes of the Halal Food Authority, the Halal Monitoring Committee, RACS. These are respected halal certifiers, both in the UK and also globally. So I think we have the structures, we've got the foundation. We just need to get together, get the center set up, training, education, and we can have a very one of the best in the world.
To be honest with you, I think I've got no desire, to run a halal center of excellence. No, I just want it to be there so that people can go in and come together and talk, and have discussions, because you need to have dialogue that progress forward. There is nothing like that, and I'm glad to say that we've sort of taken some sort of shape when it comes to stakeholder group with AHDB and the various people, and they're coming together. But what you find is everybody speaks a different language, and that gives the impression that they want different things. But when you actually look at the detail, they actually want the same things. It's just because the language you use and all the rest of it that it comes across. And I just think by having dialogue and engagement, you tend to understand each other, and you speak the same sort of language, and you start going in a direction that's useful and beneficial for the UK.
Excellent, Gama. I think we are one of the best in the world, but there is room for improvement, and this center of excellence is a no-brainer. It's something we definitely need to work on to make sure it's working in the next few years. Yeah.
I can only agree with you there, and that's very rare. Well,
I know. Gama, I, as you know, I work very closely with farmers, with processors, and halal beef is one area that is just a headache to us, because the regulations restrict us on what we can use and what we cannot use. So, for instance, in New Zealand, they got a head-only electrical stunning system that cannot be used in the UK because it's got post-stun immobilization, penetrative captive bolt. As far as I know, most certifiers do not accept it, but I did interview halal certification organization last week, and they said they were considering approving it. There are other, so gas stunning is another area that has divided opinion. What's your view about on the different methods of stunning? Do you think all methods are acceptable, and do you accept all methods of stunning? So do you accept gas, for instance? Do you accept mechanical slaughter? Do you accept penetrative captive bolt?
I think what we have to do is it's not about what we accept. What you have to do is you have to go to the fundamental principles of halal.
Yeah.
You know, so whether it's stunning or whatever, is the animal alive at the point of slaughter? And the answer is yes or no. It's simple. So therefore, as soon as you apply that question, then some of these things like captive bolt penetrative, the animal is not alive at the point of slaughter. It's brain dead. Okay. So when you actually apply that sort of logic, a lot of the methods, same with gas, for example, like recoverable. And so I think a lot of the methodologies can rule themselves out. When it comes to electric, yes, you get stun to stun under certain conditions, which are approved. So you can go through these methods and say yes or no. I think the issue becomes that, like a lot of the beef, for example, in the UK, when people say it's stunned, it's penetrative bolt, which some of the certifiers don't accept, and we don't accept either. I mean, we accept other methodologies, Jakeem, and one or two of the other ones, which sort of comply, yes, with the corrective procedures in place. But again, what happens is that you have to go on a case-by-case basis, and this is where consistency is required, because if you're not consistent, then the halal logo is being diluted, basically, and the customer thinks they're getting something that they're not getting. And this is where the certifiers have a responsibility to the customer. And this is where the regulation is quite key. Now, unfortunately, regulation can be done by the government, but the standard itself needs to be controlled by a Muslim body, whether it's Muslim Council of Britain, and other. These are sort of discussions that need to happen, so that it's governed by them, controlled by them, but governed by and policed by the normal infrastructures that we have in place, just like any other labeling, whether it's weight, whether it's nutrition, any other claims that somebody makes on pack. I think when it comes to stun, people will say gas stun. Well, actually, stun means that the animal is alive, but you can get stun to kill, there's a whole range. And I think because of the terminology, it's confusing. And I think even to the experts, it's confusing. So to the average consumer, it's even more confusing. And so therefore, I think it just needs to be simplified. And I think it's not as complicated as people make it. Just go to simple principles. does it comply with the principles? And it's just a yes or no. So when a certifier says, for example, oh, we're going to accept it, well, actually, I think you have to be transparent, and there's a lot of woolly acceptance, if you know what I mean, rather than black and white. Because I think when you challenge certain things that are out there, there's always somebody has issued an acceptance, like it takes a responsibility away. But when you question and say, does it fundamentally comply with this? The answer is no. Because it's a bit like, for example, in the UK, like all our chicken is hand slaughtered by a Muslim saying a prayer. But yet that's not the case for all of it. Some is mechanically slaughtered,
Yeah.
And some of it will be accepted. But then this is where you get into philosophical debate, and and I just think when it comes to mechanical slaughter, it's more of a welfare issue rather than anything else. So therefore, halal is very welfare friendly. The principles have been around for 5,000 years, and the reason they've developed like this was because they have the interest of the welfare of the animal at heart. Now, I think sometimes the story gets distorted because the principles haven't been implemented properly. It doesn't mean the principles are wrong. It means the implementation is wrong. So therefore, when you look at mechanical slaughter was for poultry, basically, which would be dead, stunned to kill. So it doesn't matter where the blade cut. The animal wouldn't feel pain because the animals are dead. But when the animal is alive, it's very important to get the cut right. And if you've been to most poultry processing plants, their bird sizes vary, and it's not as straight, so the cut can happen anywhere. So mechanical slaughter for a stun bird is a welfare issue than.
That means you do not accept.
No,
you do
we
not
don't,
stop
because
products
back in
from.
the day, for us, it's very important we regard welfare in the highest regard. The animal has to be alive and healthy at the point of slaughter. We have vets on site, making sure the animals are healthy, there's no disease, no anything. This is very important to us, welfare is key when it comes to halal, I think when it comes to welfare, a lot of people focus in on the non-stun halal element, which is one point in the whole chain. Okay. Whereas a halal is about the whole chain, from farm, rearing, all the way to slaughter. And I think even non-stun, when done properly, obviously research needs to be done, to prove that actually where does it sit on the scale with regards to other practices in the supply chain, when it comes to actual pain. And I think I've yet to be convinced about the research being done, to say this is actually what it says, For example, if somebody says to me, temperature 70 degrees is hot, I can feel it's hot, yeah? There's a scale there. But when it comes to the whole supply chain for welfare and pain and sustainability measurement, unfortunately, the system isn't there. And there's a lot of subjectivity. For example, we were talking about a while back, I believe, about tail docking and castration, and independent people said actually tail docking and castration is more painful than a cut. But it's the visual imagery, that sort of worries people. And to be honest with you, as a consumer, if I saw it, it would scare me as well, because, it's quite a traumatic sort of sight. But yet, in actual terms, in terms of pain, it's a different discussion.
Also mentioned very important point in your introduction that you do supply to KFC, but many Muslims may not be aware that KFC does halal. Can you let our viewers know, is it all KFC stores or all KFC restaurants that sell your products, or it is only in selected KFC restaurants?
I would have said all the KFC stores that are halal, I've got the HFA logo. They're certified by HFA.
Okay. So how can the consumer establish that? Where is the logo displayed?
Normally what you find is if you go into the store, the logo will be displayed in the store itself. Basically, that's halal certified by HFA.
Okay.
And it's selected restaurants, not all of them.
Not all the restaurants.
No.
All right. So earlier on, I've already interviewed Rizvan Khalid of Euro Quality Lambs.
Yeah.
He was of the view that a new organization that is coming up, Halal Food Information Center, may be able to solve some of the problems that that the halal sector is facing. So it could possibly be a mouthpiece for the halal sector. Do you think that is a possibility?
I think it definitely is a possibility. I think one of the sad things is that there isn't a mouthpiece, you know? And when people try to have a uniform mouthpiece, it then gets knocked down by various sectors. You know, it's a bit like they won't let you build a uniform mouthpiece because it's probably not in their interest to do it, you know? And this is what I'm saying. They don't want to come together, which I don't understand because it's for the benefit of all. And I actually think that it would be a good thing. But the reason this has come about is because there isn't a uniform mouthpiece, you know, because people have different scopes. And this is what I was saying. Everybody needs to come together on uniform platform. You know, what we're doing is we're in a rowing boat, we're all rowing in different directions. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Gama, for your time today. I really appreciate the fact that you've decided to come on this podcast, and I look forward to welcoming you to another podcast in the future. You have touched on some burning issues on slaughter methodologies, on how to improve practices in the halal sector. So I thank you very, very much for coming on this podcast.
I mean, all I would add is thank you very much for having me, and it's all because I went to Reading University that I was able to do this. Thank you, Awal.
I knew you add something about Reading in the end, but as you know, Bristol University will continue to be a top university in the UK because Bristol University is the university of choice. Is the university that everybody aspire to go to. So I'll urge everybody.
Can I just say something? The difference between Reading and Bristol is you went to Bristol, you don't have a Bristol University tie. I went to Reading and I have a tie. I rest my case. That's it.
All right. You're right. See you later, Gama. Thank you very much, Gama.
All right. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.